St. Patrick's Day is on Sunday, and I wanted to share a story about... This guy might be my favorite Irishman of all time, at least my favorite Irish American. And, of course, we were talking about the story of Michael Malloy, who is later would become known as Iron Mike or Mike the Durable. So this is a great little history story from New York City. So Michael Malloy, he was born sometime around 1873 in County Donegal in northwestern Ireland. And at some point he moved to America and settled in the Bronx. The only really thing we know about him is that at some point he was working as a fireman, but by 1932, he wasn't doing that anymore. He was a drunk, and he was a homeless drunk, and he wandered the streets, and that was around the time that, in that summer, 5 men who were acquainted with Michael Malloy, and these are the names, I love Great Depression-era names, Tough Tony Marino, Joseph Red Murphy, so Irish guy.
He probably had red hair.
Yep, absolutely. Francis Pasqua, Harry Hershey Green, and Daniel Kreisberg.
They weren't as creative back then.
Yeah, well, it was the Great Depression. They were all out of names.
There was less words back then, too.
That's true.
Yeah.
We have thrown more words in the game. They couldn't be called Little Baby Joker or whatever.
little sniper. So, later known as the quote-unquote murder trust, these guys plotted to make some money by taking out 3 life insurance policies on Malloy, and then they would simply get him to drink himself to death. So this is, again, Great Depression.
Wow.
Everybody's running scams. So there's this homeless guy that they see on the streets. They're like, hey, if we could sign him up for some life insurance and then find a way for him to accidentally die by misadventure, then we could collect on it. So that's the plan. Malloy looked like an easy mark. Marino had pulled off such a scheme once before. The previous year, the 27-year-old had befriended a homeless woman named Maybelle Carson and convinced her to take out a $2,000 life insurance policy, naming him as the beneficiary. And on a frigid night, he plied her with alcohol, took off her clothes, doused the sheets and mattress that she was sleeping on with ice water, pushed the bed next to an open window, and the medical examiner listed the cause of death as bronchial pneumonia, and Marino collected the money without incident. So he killed somebody the year before.
In a horrifying way.
In a fucked up, crazy way. And so he figured Mike Malloy, who looked to be about 60 and was in terrible shape, quote, he looks all in. He ain't got much longer to go anyhow. The stuff is getting to him. So they're like, this guy's on his last rope. We're doing him a favor.
Right.
So,
You're not. We're collecting money off his death.
Yeah, but like, it's a little bit of mercy killing. And so they agreed to go ahead with the plan. Marino owned a speakeasy and began giving Malloy unlimited credit, thinking that Malloy would abuse it and drink himself to death. They began giving Malloy free drinks, and Malloy, who was accustomed to getting thrown out because of his lack of funds, was so thrilled that he eagerly signed a petition that would help elect Marino for local office.
I just think he's a great businessman.
Yeah. He's just
a great businessman can run a great city.
What he had actually signed was an insurance policy from Metropolitan Life and 2 from Prudential. The gang even provided Malloy with a crash pad in the back of the bar to sleep off his hangovers. So they're like hooking this dude up.
Was it next to a cold window and a bucket of ice water?
It was in the basement. It was in the basement. So the first part of the Michael Malloy plot was successful and probably achieved with the aid of a corrupt insurance agent. So they stood to gain over $3,500, which is roughly $82,000 in today's money if Malloy died an accidental death.
Ooh, it's a good chunk of change.
Hell yeah. Quote, Malloy had been a hard drinker all his life, one witness said, and he drank on and on. He drank until Marino's arm tired from holding the bottle. Remarkably, his breathing remained steady. His skin retained its normally ruddy tinge. Finally, he dragged a grungy sleeve across his mouth, thanked his host for the hospitality, and said he'd be back soon. And within 24 hours, he was. So he just drank all of the booze and then was like, see you later, fellas.
Wow.
They forget the tolerance of an old, drunken, homeless man is probably pretty high.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He drinks more than he eats, most likely.
Yeah, like when your liver's that hard, it just flows over it. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So Malloy followed this pattern for 3 days, pausing only long enough to eat a complimentary sardine sandwich. Marino and his associates were at a loss. Maybe they hoped Malloy would choke on his own vomit or fall and slam his head, but on the 4th day, Malloy stumbled into the bar. "Boy," he exclaimed, nodding at Marino, "ain't I got a thirst?" So every day he just leaves the bar and they're like, maybe tonight's the night he dies. And then he just keeps coming back. "Ahoy, everybody."
And they're on day 4 of trying this?
Yes. Yeah. And this ends up going on for a while.
Incredible.
So Tough Tony grew impatient, suggesting somebody simply shoot Malloy in the head, but Murphy recommended a more
Do
subtle
you still get the
solution.
insurance money?
If you put the gun in his hand after you're done with it, probably.
No, that's not how life insurance works. Because they know everyone will just get rich.
That's true.
Yeah.
So they recommended a subtle solution, exchanging Malloy's whiskey for shots of wood alcohol. For anybody who's seen Ken Burns' Prohibition documentary, that is what they used to sell during Prohibition, which is it's a form of alcohol, but you're not supposed to drink wood alcohol. That will absolutely kill you. That's for varnishing and cleaning.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not meant to be drank. Drinks containing just 4% wood alcohol could cause blindness, and by 1929, over 50,000 people nationwide had died from the effects of impure alcohol.
Holy cow.
They would serve Malloy shots of pure wood alcohol, so they didn't like stir it into anything. And again, 4% of this stuff can make you go blind. They just were giving him straight up shots of the pure stuff.
Oh my God.
And so they kept giving him cheap whiskey to get him feeling good, and then they made the switch over to wood alcohol. The gang watch wrapped as Malloy downed several shots and kept asking for more, displaying no physical symptoms other than those typical of inebriation. He drank all of the wood alcohol he was given and then came back for more. So
This dude met a genie like 2 weeks earlier and made one wish.
yes,
Like,
yeah. Well, or just, born with Irish genetics is part of it too. Night after night, the scene repeated itself, with Malloy drinking shots of wood alcohol as fast as Murphy could pour them until the night that he crumpled to the floor. Pasqua knelt by Malloy's body, feeling the neck for a pulse, lowering his ear to the mouth. The man's breathing was slow and labored, and the gang waited for the inevitable, watching the sluggish rise and fall of the man's chest. Any minute now. Finally, there was a long, jagged breath. A death rattle, perhaps. No, Malloy just started snoring. He awakened some hours later, rubbed his eyes, and said, "Give me some of the old regular, me lad."
this is amazing.
So yeah, this is not going good for them. But now they've got to come up with some new plans. So the open bar tab, the cans of wood alcohol, and the monthly insurance premiums were all starting to add up over the next few months.
They're paying the
They
insurance.
have to pay for
premium.
the insurance
Oh
the whole
my
time. So
God.
now this is becoming a money losing situation the longer this guy doesn't die. So the plot to kill Michael Malloy was becoming cost prohibitive. Marino fretted that his speakeasy would go bankrupt. Tough Tony once again advocated to shoot him in the head, but Pasquale had an idea.
Wait, can we just acknowledge that everyone's like, Tony?
I think at this point he's just pissed. He's like, you know what? I don't even care about the insurance. I just want this guy dead.
Tony, we've said no so many times.
Yeah,
You
okay.
keep bringing it up. It's going to be no every time.
Slowly puts his gun back.
Next time, Tony. So Malloy had a well-known taste for seafood. So this is Pasquale's suggestion. Why not drop some oysters in denatured alcohol, let them soak for a few days, and serve them while Malloy imbibed? So denatured alcohol is essentially, it's alcohol that they've just added ingredients to specifically so humans can't drink it, which was the thing they did during Prohibition. So like rubbing alcohol was, they'd put, whatever kind of chemicals in there to make it so you couldn't drink it without killing yourself.
Wow.
And that's part of the 50,000 people that died was drinking denatured alcohol. So anyway, they're going to soak oysters in denatured alcohol and send it to the guy. Malloy ate the oysters one by one, savoring each bite, and then washed them down with pure wood alcohol.
And Tony's like, what if we had a gun in one of the oysters?
Just one bullet. They'll think it's a pearl.
The gang watched in astonishment as Malloy finished his meal, licked his fingers, and loudly belched. So
Amazing.
this guy-
I like how the part of this was he had a known love for seafood. Would
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
get drunk and talk about how much you love seafood?
Well, they served him a sardine sandwich. I guess that was his
okay.
food choice, because
Yeah.
they're trying to make this guy as happy as they can, so he'll drink himself to death in this bar. So he's just like, well, if I could have anything, I guess it'd be a sardine sandwich, and then that's what they bring him. So
Happy people don't drink themselves to death.
Yeah.
So Murphy tried his hand at killing Malloy next. He let a tin of sardines rot for several days and then mixed in some metal shrapnel.
Oh my God.
He then served Malloy the sandwich. Any minute, they thought, the metal would start slashing through his guts. Instead, Malloy finished this sandwich and asked for another.
This is amazing. This dude is an alien.
This guy's the best.
He's Rasputin.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's actually the name he is later called. The Bronx Rasputin is what he's known as later. In January of 1933, after calling an emergency meeting, the gang decided to go back to a tried and true method. After getting Malloy plowed, Marino and Pasqua drove the unconscious man to a park, dragged his body through the snow, and deposited him on a bench. It was negative 14 degrees. They stripped off his shirt and dumped 5 gallons of water on his chest and head. Malloy didn't move. So when Marino arrived at his speakeasy the next morning, he was shocked to see Malloy sleeping on the floor of the basement. He had somehow trekked the half-mile back to the speakeasy and persuaded Murphy to let him in. When he came to, he complained of a wee chill.
Meanwhile, these men are drinking themselves to death because they're like losing their minds trying to kill this guy, right?
It's so fucking funny. Like why this isn't like a Coen Brothers movie is beyond me.
Oh, that would be phenomenal.
It's because you don't even have to give this guy any dialogue. It's just like you give all of the murderers all the dialogue, and they're just like, this fucking guy. Like by the end, they're just so pissed. So Harry Hershey Green ran a taxi company. And the gang paid him $150 to run over Malloy. The idea was they would they basically get him drunk, help him out of the bar, and then they were like going to hold him up, and then at the last second dive and then let the taxi hit him.
Yeah,
was the idea. Malloy managed to jump out of the way the first 2 times they did this. And on the third attempt, Green, and this is how it's written, this is from Smithsonian magazine, by the way. On the third attempt, Green raced towards Malloy at 50 miles per hour. From around the corner, the gang heard 2 thuds, one loud and one soft. The body hitting the hood and then dropping to the ground. For good measure, Green backed up over him. The gang was sure Malloy was dead, but a passing car made them all run away from the scene before they could confirm. 5 days later, the door to Marino's speakeasy swung open, and in limped a battered, bandaged Michael Malloy, looking only slightly worse for wear. Oh my God. It's like you see the movie in your mind of just this guy just coming in with like half his arm hanging off.
Yeah.
This is perfect. So the gang had finally had enough. On February 21st, 1933, 7 months after the murder trust first convened, after Malloy passed out that night, they took him to Murphy's room and put a hose in his mouth that was connected to the gas light fixture, wrapped a towel around his head, and turned the gas on. This finally killed Michael Malloy.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
That's the method.
Yeah, that took care of it. He was pronounced dead of pneumonia by a bribed doctor and quickly buried. And my whole thing is, I'm like, if you had just done this at the beginning and bribed the doctor, you could have shot him in the head and bribed a doctor. If this was what you were going to do all along, it seems like all of this was just to avoid having to pay a bribe to the guy at the morgue.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was finally buried. And despite this, the murder trust failed to divide the collected loot evenly, and they proceeded to fight over it. So they got the money. It worked, but then they just started getting in a fight with each other. They couldn't agree on how they wanted to handle it. And eventually, due to all this infighting, the police heard about rumors about Michael Malloy, the Rasputin of the Bronx, in speakeasies all over town. And they had the body exhumed and forensically examined. And the 5 men were put on trial. Harry Hershey Green went to prison, and the other 4 guys were executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing. Yeah. So unlike Mike, none of them survived. So that's my favorite Irish guy, Mike Malloy, right there.
Damn.
The Rasputin of the Bronx.
Wow.
Yeah. So happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. That's the guy.
Don't try to defraud insurance companies.
Yeah, I know.
That's the lesson you'll take from this podcast.
Yeah.
You will get executed in Sing Sing. That's just what happens. There's a precedent for it historically.
That's wild.
It's one of my favorites. And I forgot to mention at the beginning. Yeah, I took that from irishcentral.com and Karen Abbott writing for Smithsonian magazine. So great story about Michael Malloy.